Hi, these comments are for LAN, and I am Michael from BetterTOEFLScores.com, and I'm getting ready to listen to a speaking practice test you sent me. Let's take a look at the email. You say, here's my speaking practice test. Some people unexpectedly receive a large amount of money, spend it on practical things, while others spend it for pleasure only. Which do you think is better and why? So then you wrote in this response, I only gave one reason and one example. Does it affect my score because I'm afraid that I cannot complete two reasons and two examples in just 45 seconds? So I guess the answer is it depends on how many words you get in your response in 45 seconds. So if you speak with one reason and one example and you talk about that in say 100 to 150 words, I don't think it will affect your score at all. I mean, why am I saying that? I mean, if I look at the actual rubrics here, the main thing is topic development. It says here in the rubrics, it is generally well developed and coherent relationship between ideas are clear, or a clear progression of ideas. As long as you take time to develop that one reason, I think you should be in good shape. The problem is, let's say you do two or three reasons, right? The problem in that case, you will not elaborate or be specific enough, and that's going to end up putting you in the 3 or the 23-point category. So yes, I think that you can still get a good score even with one reason plus one example. If anybody at YouTube agrees or disagrees with me, please put your comments below this video. We can create a conversation about topic development. What is or is not appropriate when it comes to your speaking, the independent speaking task on the TOEFL exam. Let's listen to your response now, keeping in mind the topic that you just told me. Let me refresh my memory one more time. So how should we spend the money? I guess that's the key. I have the rubrics here on the left for the independent speaking task. I have your speaking on the right. Here we go.
In my opinion, it is better to spend money that I unexpectedly receive on practical things rather than for pleasure only.
Yeah, a little bit slow, and you need to do a little bit better with your pacing on that. And it is my opinion, or in my opinion, I don't think you even need to say that. Just state what your argument is and move on to your example.
Spending on practical things might help me
Say spending money on practical things.
save money for emergency purposes.
Okay.
For example, my parents won a lottery prize of around $1,000, which was partly used to pay my
I want to say $1,000. Dollars in that case. So when the S occurs after a voiced consonant at the end of the word, it's going to sound more like a Z.
household bills instead of luxury vacations or clothes, and the rest was saved as an emergency fund. During the first 6 months of COVID-19, my family couldn't have survived if my parents hadn't saved that lottery money.
I would probably say my parents wouldn't have survived, or we would not have survived economically if we hadn't saved that COVID money. So I would use would there instead of could, because you're talking about what's called a past and possible situation. So I think the would works better in that case.
Since they had no income at that time, that's why I would choose
At that time. So that's a diphthong. The I at that time.
to spend money on practical things.
Good. So the example was perfect. I mean, you spent. I don't know how much you spent on this. Give me a second. I want to time the example. I liked how you spent that much time on the example.
To spend money that I
Hold on. Hey Siri, show me my stopwatch. Okay, I want to see how long it takes for you to do this. Let's get to
Expectedly
the example.
receive on practical things rather than for pleasure
Once you start
only.
the example, I'll give you.
Spending on practical things might help me save money for emergency
Okay, I
purposes.
started my
For
watch.
example, my parents won a lottery prize of around $1,000, which was partly used to pay my household bills instead of luxury vacations or clothes, and the rest was saved as an emergency fund. During the first 6 months of COVID-19, my family couldn't have survived if my parents hadn't saved that lottery money, since they had no income at that time. That's why I would choose to spend money on practical
Okay,
things.
I'm going to stop it right there. So what does that mean? You made your point that you think it's important to save the money for emergency purposes. You gave an example. You spent 33.82 seconds explaining that one example. What does that mean? Does that mean that the overall development is somewhat limited? Are you kidding me? No, no way. Does it mean that you lack elaboration or specificity after spending 33 seconds on one example? It does not mean that. It means exactly this. It is well developed and coherent. Relationship between ideas are clear. I can understand exactly why you gave me that example about getting that money, winning that lottery money, and holding on to that. And then the COVID pandemic happened, and your parents needed that money. It's called saving money for a rainy day. That's exactly what they did. Okay, so I don't think the way that you answered this question, going back to answering your question, you gave one reason, one example. No, it does not affect your score at all. I think one reason plus one example, and discussing that example in 33 seconds is plenty, is good. Now, what is your score here? Let me listen to it one more time. I'm afraid I think there are some minor problems I think with your delivery that may bring this score down a little bit. Let's listen to it one more
In
time.
my opinion, it is better to spend money that I unexpectedly receive on practical things rather than for pleasure only. Spending on practical things might help me save money for emergency purposes. For example, my parents won a lottery prize of around $1,000,
Okay.
which was partly used to pay my household bills instead of
The household, not B, but bill, bills, bills.
luxury vacations or clothes, and the rest was saved as an emergency fund. During the first 6 months of COVID-19, my family couldn't have survived if my parents hadn't saved that lottery money, since they had no income at that time. That's why I would choose to spend money on practical things.
Right. So I think when I'm listening to you, I do notice in this case some problems with pacing. Sometimes you're not pausing in the right part of the sentence. You pause sometimes in the middle of the sentence. So that's a problem with what I call at my website thought groups and blending. So I think that's an area that you want to take a look at. Thought groups and blending, pronunciation lessons 41 through 44. That's a good set of lessons for you to focus on. Language use, as far as I can tell, you had pretty good control of your vocabulary and your grammar. I didn't notice any major errors in there. I don't think that you're too limited in the range of your structures. You said that if they hadn't, they wouldn't have survived if they hadn't saved the money. So you're using, in that case, in a conditional clause, you're using the past perfect verb tenses to talk about that past impossible condition. Hey, if that's not advanced grammar, if that's not good control of grammar, I don't know what is. So you're showing me you have great control over your grammar. So I think your language use is more in the four area. Your delivery is maybe in the two area, no, the three area. And then your topic development, it's sustained and sufficient. Yes, it's well developed and coherent. Relationship between ideas are clear. So what do we have here? We have a four language use, maybe a four topic development, and more of a three with your delivery. So I'm going to put you in a score here, and I have no idea exactly how they score. If anybody knows exactly how the TOEFL reaches its scores, post it below the video in the comments. So I'm going to say, based on a lot of people that I've graded in the past, I'm going to put you I'm going to say maybe 24 to 26 points out of 30 on this practice test. I think the only thing that's bringing you down right now is your delivery. I liked the language use and the topic development area.